There we go. Sorry. All right, guys, I had it muted. We were having some technical difficulties before. So uh, let me start this off. I'm Chris Hinkle. I'm your blunt force conservative. I'm a retired FBI supervisory special agent. More importantly, I'm a husband, a father of three boys, and I have two daughters-in-law. And I have my youngest son has a girl that we'll see where that goes coming up soon. But one of the things I've been doing lately is getting myself back in shape for the coming granddaughter that will be here next month. And fortunately for me, I have access to one of the best personal trainers on the planet, and that is my old son, Jake. Jake is he's the operations manager now at the Madison Healthplex, which is a large healthplex facility here in Madison, Mississippi. It's the largest one in the state. And he started out there folding towels in 2014 and then moved his way up through as he was going through college and getting his degrees. He's got his master's degree in exercise science and kinesiology. And he is now the operations director. He just got another promotion. So, Mr. Producer, if you'll go to my screen share, I'm going to show some of the work that Jake has been doing with me. And give me a second here. Let's see if I can get this thing going. Uh, Wait. Oh, that's not it. Hold on. Let me get that back up there. Mr. Producer, can we get my screen share on? There we go. All right. So this right here is me at our local gym. It's a club for fitness here in Madison. Those are real weights. This is not some kind of fake weight or anything like that. I'm about between probably on a good day, if I've stretched, I'm probably about 5'8". I'm about 180, 185 pounds. And let's see how this goes here. See what we can do. This is called Grandpa Strong. Count them off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. There we go. Let's rack it. All right, Mr. Producer, you can come back to me. Just wanted to give you guys a little update on my progress. Now, if you think I'm strong, you ought to see my son. Uh, in high school, he was squatting about 540, deadlifting about the same, and pause benching, which is very, very hard to do, over 300 pounds. But I want to get into our guest right now. And our our first guest is John Nance. And John and I became acquainted here in the last, 5 or 6 years or so. If you want to bring John in now, we'll bring him up on the screen, Mr. Producer. And John and I have been in this little text group since about 2020, 2021, maybe. Uh, and John is, I'd reached out to him on LinkedIn because he was writing and I was looking into getting into writing. And I saw that there was an FBI supervisory special agent doing the same thing. So we started chatting. The next thing I know, we've got him in a little text group there's about 6 of us now that are in there now. And we've had a great time talking about our FBI careers, some ideas about how to get some things fixed. We all have some mutual connections and get to make our recommendations. But John is, like I said, a town hall columnist. And John, welcome to the Blunt Force Conservative Podcast. I can't believe I haven't had you on sooner.
Well, thanks, Chris. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I want to talk first about your column. So, Mr. Producer, if you'll put that up there, John's latest column is dealing with some recent changes at the FBI. A couple of the names, there were about 4 individuals that were recently terminated or walked out the door, as we say. And two of those individuals, well, one of those individuals I know personally, and another one, our mutual friend Jim Galliano vouches for. And if Jim vouches for him, then I'm fine. I am just fine with what they're doing. Uh, so you had a chance to chat with both of them. They're uh, Stephen Jensen, who was an assistant special agent in charge down here in Jackson, Mississippi, the last 2 years before I retired. And is it Matt Driscoll?
No, it's
What's
Brian
Driscoll's
Driscoll.
first name?
Brian.
Brian Driscoll is a former hostage rescue team member, and you had a chance to chat with him. Why don't you give us a little backstory about your article and what prompted you to write it?
Well, I've talked to Jensen. I haven't talked to Driscoll yet. Both of them are filing a lawsuit, so they're not really wanting to talk to media. Not that I really consider myself media until after they file. But Jensen, I've spoken to. Uh, I have very, very good friends that know Jensen that vouched for him. You've worked with him. You vouched for him. But the impetus behind this article is to attempt to help right a wrong. So both Jensen and Driscoll have been maligned, obviously unfairly, unjustly. They've been summarily dismissed without explanation. Jensen, in particular, has been slandered quite a bit, especially by a small group of former FBI agents that are self-styled whistleblowers, individuals that have significant issues, but a huge axe to grind, essentially. The criticism of Jensen centers particularly around some congressional testimony that George Hill gave back in 2023. So this is a couple of years old. And he alleged that he participated in a big conference call. It's called a civets call. It's basically like a big secure call on which thousands of people, which he alleges participated. And he said that when Jensen was asked by some folks from the Richmond division about how the J6 investigation should be handled, Hill says that Jensen kind of went off the rails and said, I don't give a GD about these J6 individuals. The Bureau needs to go after them with a vengeance. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but you can go to my current article, hit the link to my previous article on this subject, and see the exact language and some links to the original documents. Now, it's been 2 years since Jensen gave that testimony, and not a single person has come forward to corroborate his story. And at the time, Jensen denied making that statement. And you, like anybody else who has worked with Jensen, can testify to the fact that he does not use profanity. He denied before Congress using profanity. It is completely outside his character. A lot of folks on social media have been calling him J6 Jensen. That is an absolute smear and slander. He was assigned as a unit chief in headquarters during some of this time period that's in question. In fact, he was punished by being transferred to Quantico for pushing back on a lot of what he perceived as January 6th overreach. So he was appointed by Kash Patel to head up the Washington field office, fully endorsed by Kash Patel and by Dan Bongino. Those endorsements have not been rescinded, and you won't see them rescinded either. So there's been this sort of a groundswell of discontent, of slander and libel that is coming from a small group of people. And somehow they were able to get some information to a White House official. And I think that prompted the White House to make some of these drastic decisions. Now, you mentioned there were four individuals that were let go. I don't really know a lot about their backstory, their history. There could be some justification to those dismissals. I don't know, but I do know for sure that when it comes to Brian Driscoll and to Steve Jensen, these two individuals have been unjustly targeted by some nefarious, in my estimation, individuals.
Yeah, I think those individuals that will remain unnamed, I think it's very telling that something significant like this happens, and there's been very little media attention to
Mm.
it. There's
Yeah.
been some, some of these large follower podcasters that, have kind of highlighted what those individuals say, but really some of the other seasoned reporters, seasoned investigative journalists out there really haven't keyed on it, which is unusual, but I think it's kind of telling. I think they realize that this is likely a mistake and it's not something they're going to try to capitalize on. As far as Jensen, the reason I first spoke out about him is when I saw that he was being maligned as this J6 warlord. I spoke out immediately because I'd worked with the guy. I didn't work for him. He was an ASAC, an assistant special agent in charge in Jackson. I'd worked primarily directly for the special agent in charge my last few years in. And I just saw this testimony from this Hill guy who I'd never heard of.
Mm.
And I said, well, let me take a look and see what the testimony is. So, unlike a lot of people, I read through that 150 plus page testimony to look to see if there was anything else. I couldn't find anybody else that was corroborating what Hill was saying. And I noted that Jensen countered that. And I started asking around. I talked to people that worked with him in training division, that worked with him in Columbia. In our circle, we know a lot of people
Mhm.
that retired and some still currently in the FBI. I bumped into one of them that was a retired assistant director in charge who actually knew Jensen when Jensen was sent down to training. He wasn't a unit chief. He was actually a section chief up at uh,
Right.
up at
Right.
headquarters.
Right.
But you and I both know that a section chief has zero power over people in the field. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of the vim and the vigor was focused on him. They were just looking for a head to put on a pike. Now, I have been outspoken saying that I do believe that many of the J6 prisoners did have their rights violated. That was my forte down in Jackson, Mississippi, running the civil rights program there. And just looking at due process and how they were treated, I think they have a very strong case. And I've offered if they needed any assistance whatsoever, I'd be glad to help them. But Steve Jensen's not the bad guy here. It's the people up above him. If anything, as the section chief, he funneled information from the highest levels in the FBI and DOJ out to the field. I do know one of the special agents in charge that he funneled information to, that the higher ups were making a recommendation that they use probably a more aggressive than necessary means to go out and execute an arrest warrant of somebody from J6. And I know that special agent in charge of that division, and he pushed back on that. And as far as I know, it didn't happen. They may have effected the arrest, but it wasn't done with a SWAT team or anything like that. But it wasn't Stephen Jensen directing that. He just didn't have the authority to do it. And I, like you, had also come across that information that he had pushed back on some things, which caused him to be transferred down to Quantico. Now, technically, from section chief to deputy assistant director, training division is supposed to be a promotion. But those of us that were in the FBI for more than a cup of coffee will tell you there is a
Mhm.
stark difference between a supervisory special agent or a DAD at Quantico at the training division in those that are operating out in the field as a GS-14 or as a senior executive in a investigative division or an operational division.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
so what can you give us any insight of how they're holding up? How is Jensen holding up? I haven't spoken with him. I had traded a DM message with him on LinkedIn when all this stuff was going down. And I've been pretty open that I was contacted not long after that when Jensen was promoted and was told that my efforts to correct the record, or at least tell about the guy that I knew, were heard, which made it such a surprise that he was terminated. And just from who I've talked to, and we don't have any specific insider information or anything like that, but people we trust that do have told us that this was a decision made by the White House, and which kind of
Mhm.
confirmed what you said in your article. How is Stephen holding up right now with this? What's his demeanor?
Well, he's a man of deep faith and conviction. In fact, when he was at Quantico, he's the kind of guy that starts Bible studies. That's the kind of person that Steve Jensen is. He's got 10 kids, and I think he's holding up as well as can be expected. Again, his faith is a very important part of who he is and of his perspective on life. And he's viewing all this as being guided by God's hand. But of course, like I mentioned, he and Driscoll are both pursuing litigation. And I think this is a very easy case, kind of an open and shut wrongful termination case. So I expect to see them very successful in achieving whatever goals they and their legal team are looking to achieve. And I appreciate you correcting me about the section chief title. So, um, Driscoll, he's highly decorated agent, HRT guy, all the people that we know, all the very credible, highly experienced people, former FBI agents that we know, speak very highly of Driscoll. Most people know him probably as the acting director in the interim before Kash Patel was confirmed as director. And one incident in particular, I think, drew a lot of media attention toward Driscoll, and that had to do with the administration looking for the names of agents that were working on J6 cases. Now, he pushed back on that because he simply, as I stated in my piece, he simply didn't want to feed those people to the wolves. So what he attempted to do was provide the EIN numbers of employees that worked on January 6 cases, the vast majority of which were working in good faith on those cases. And you brought up an interesting, a good point about J6 defendants being persecuted essentially by DOJ. I agree with that assessment 100%. There were a lot of folks that were guilty of nothing more than the obscure charge of federal trespassing, and DOJ went after them with a vengeance. Um, Biden's DOJ, I should say. So, there are people that were involved with that. Kash Patel, Dan Bongino have been going after those people, but applying due process uh, and making sure that things are done the right way. I think both Patel and I think in particular Bongino has been messaging on X that just because you don't see things happening doesn't mean things aren't happening, and that we have to do things the right way so that we make sure that these reform efforts take hold and continue beyond, you know, Director Patel's tenure as director, beyond the next presidential election cycle. So these things are really important. But Driscoll ended up providing names. The administration rejected the EIN numbers, and there wasn't space to go into it in my piece. But he did provide names via a secure means. So I think he successfully sort of threaded the needle there to make sure that the interests of justice were served, but that you didn't have, scalps being handed out left and right. And ironically enough, Driscoll and Jensen are both sort of scalps, so to speak. So I'm really disappointed, have been very disappointed. I know you are as well, and many others to have seen this happen the way it's happened.
Yeah, and I think the counter that people will throw out there was, where was your ire about the mistreatment of January 6 people? Most of the people asking questions like that never take the time to go back and even look
Mhm.
to see what we said. They just immediately throw something out there, similar to, the charges that, well, you guys never did anything in your career. You never, accomplished anything. You're just part of the problem. You're part of the management. And as a matter of fact, you even had your toe to toe with Dan Bongino, with him actually believing that you're some mouthpiece for the FBI. And I'm thinking, dude, have you not read any articles that John has written? I mean, I know you personally, but the fact that he would say something like that shows that, there's a difference on the outside when he's misinformed and he's acting based off of whatever, the irate topic of the day is, which I thought was just, I thought it was ridiculous when that was said.
Mm.
But things change, and whether you get an apology from him, I don't know if you'll get that. Maybe you'll get something like that if you ever see him in person, but I think he understands now what you were talking about at the time, and I don't want to go into that because I don't want to give any fodder to these individuals that are spending their days constantly tearing down the entire FBI. You want to focus your ire on somebody, do what we've done. I focused it on, I thought Robert Mueller was began this problem in the FBI. He was the second director I worked under. I definitely know that Comey was a problem. I picked up on that as the first time I met him.
Mm.
And then with Chris Wray, being an empty suit. But there were others that were involved in that didn't have to do with the rank and file. Now, most citizens will try to say, well, the rank and file should have just said no. It doesn't work that way.
Mm.
It's not that you can't say no. You can say no. There's going to be consequences of you saying no and not doing it. But when a court issues a order, an arrest warrant or a search warrant, and says you are directed to go do these things and seize these things or seize this person, uh, you don't have a choice on executing that. Now, you can make some recommendations. And what I try to tell people inside the FBI, or that haven't been inside the FBI, is typically what happens are the more senior agents are able to voice their concerns about, is this really a good idea? And I've found in my career, even when I worked for special agents in charge that were younger than I was, or that had been in the FBI less time, and Jensen had been in less than I had. But you kind of you make your bones through your career, and you're able to make those recommendations like, hey, boss, maybe we could do it this way. It's a little safer. You can make that recommendation. What I find is hilarious is to hear from people that had, I keep saying, barely a cup of coffee in the FBI, and now they're being touted as experts on how the FBI operates, and it's laughable. Uh, I don't care whether the people that are platforming them want to call any one of us and talk to us. Really, I really don't care. What I do care about are the good men and women that are still in the FBI. The majority of the FBI, and I'm talking like 99.9%, are good, constitutional, upstanding Americans. They don't have the opportunity to fight back. A lot of it's because of the Hatch Act, or just, violating their protocols and policies and things like that. You and I are on the outside now. We're not subject to the Hatch Act anymore, and we can speak out on behalf of them. And I've had a number of them contact me on behalf of us speaking out. So when I hear ridiculous statements like disarm the FBI, tear down the FBI, I thought it was ridiculous when Kash Patel said it. I think he understands differently now that he's on the inside. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of get that off my chest there. I want to get into what's going on in DC, because tomorrow, for those of you that are out there listening to this podcast, John and I are going to be on, well, I'm going to be on WWDB on up there at the Conservative Voice up in Pennsylvania with my good friend Ada Nestor. And we're going to chat a little bit about the DC stuff. But you've had the opportunity to be on Newsmax a couple of times. We were both on the radio on Monday. We didn't really get a chance to get into all of the DC stuff. But real quick, I want to play a couple of videos. So, Mr. Producer, can you play the let's go with video number 2. And this is the subway, the famous way Sam not recommended. I did think it took him a little while to chase him down. I thought it took a little longer than I would have imagined. Usually the reactions are a little quicker than that, but they did get him into custody, and he's going to find out that he's going to have a felony conviction for assault on a federal officer. It is a charge. Now, I also want to play some advice from somebody, and this is the video number one. This one has audio to it. I did take out some of the racial stuff that was in it. It took me a while to play around with that. So, Mr. Producer, let's play this cogent advice from this DC resident to the citizens of in DC about what's going on.
Check this out. We all listen to all my homies, man. Everybody in DC, man. Listen, I don't know if y'all been paying attention, but check this out, man. They got the National Guard, they got DEA, the FBI, Park Police, Capitol Police, DC Police, all working together. Trump got these niggas on a mission. So what I'm saying to y'all is now ain't the time in my city, in DC. I don't know about nobody else. He ain't do that nowhere else. But it's a state of emergency in my city. So all I'm saying to you is now ain't the time to be riding around with guns and drinking and smoking weed. You know what I'm saying? Now ain't the time, bro. This ain't these next 30 days is gonna show a lot. We can't go nowhere without this, man. And that's because it's like this because the youngest keep tipping, bro. We can't go no that shit, bro. There's no points in it for that, man. Now this is where we come to a state of emergency. You hear me? DC is under emergency. The Metropolitan Police Department has lost its fucking custody for 30 days. Now Trump about to get in here and start roughing shit off, man. They already started. They done came through the yo 2 or 3 times already. They done pushed up on my man yesterday, wasn't doing nothing. Pushed up on them. They is not playing out here, man. So if you want to get a football number now, keep doing that dumb shit. Keep doing the shit that y'all doing, bro. Y'all making it, come on, bro. We gotta do better, man. And I'm not just saying it's for the YN. Listen, if you got certain motions, man, now is to curtail that shit a little bit, man, because if they catch you, they fucking you over. And ain't nothing nobody else can do about it. I'm just being.
All right, Mr. Producer, let's come back. That is cogent advice. It's colorful language that's in there. I took the racial stuff out. He was dropping a couple of N-words in there that I just wasn't comfortable with putting on my platform. But it is advice. If you're going to keep doing this stuff, this swarm of federal attention that these individuals are drawing to themselves, playtime is over. This is not where you're going to be able to where Homeland Security is told to just, officers are told to just stand there and take it, or what was going on during the Biden administration out in Seattle with officers getting hit, and you didn't have any recourse to do anything about it. Man, I don't care what it is. Whatever you're doing in Washington D.C., if it's illegal, they're gonna find you. And now they've got the military there not executing any laws, not affecting arrest, but they're freeing up resources just by mere presence in the area. You're going to bring the crime down. And I think what terrifies Democrats right now is they're going to see these streets start getting cleaned up. Trump's already cleaning up the homeless encampments right now as well. But what are your thoughts on this swarm mentality? We've always had task forces where we work together, but focusing on the area. DC is not a big area; it's 5 square miles. To put that amount of resources in that area and show that it can stop, they will stop it. They're going to get these guys off the street. I don't care what you're doing. I don't care how brave you think you are, brother. You don't want to bring the ire of a group of federal agents. They will mess you up. They will take your butt into jail, and the court will sort it out. They're not interested in talking to you on the streets. You do something stupid like this idiot did, throwing a sandwich. He's seen too many videos of what's going on out in California. It ain't California. It ain't California now. I was surprised to see it, but I think it's needed, and I think it sends a message. What are your thoughts about this, especially sandwich guy being some dumb enough to do something like that?
Yeah, well, I think it shows that numbers matter, right? When Democrats talk about reducing the number of law enforcement on the street, well, obviously you're encouraging criminal activity. So the inverse is true. If you increase the number of law enforcement on the street, you're going to suppress criminal activity. So it's common sense, right? Let me circle back a little bit though. The stuff with Dan Bongino, that's kind of ancient history, water under the bridge as far as I'm concerned. And I wholeheartedly support his efforts to reform the FBI. So everything I've seen him do so far, I think have been necessary and thoughtful and good responses to the politicization and the weaponization that occurred under the Biden administration. But as far as sandwich guy goes, I got to take up for the agents a little bit. If you ever chase somebody down wearing body armor, it takes a minute or two to get off that starting line. So I don't want to be too hard on that particular individual. But it just demonstrates the level of arrogance that exists out in the community or out in that. Well, at least, I guess this guy was a DOJ employee, so what he thought he could get away with assaulting a federal agent. And then I was encouraged to see, and not surprised to see, DOJ put out something saying that, if you put your hands on a law enforcement officer, any law enforcement officer, we're coming after you. So I really like to see this pro law enforcement position that the administration is taking, and this messaging is very, very important. So you message a law and order philosophy that filters very quickly down to the street because criminals to a large degree are practical people. So if you make their job hard, they're not going to be so inclined to engage in that sort of criminal activity. So numbers matter a great deal. I also wanted to mention something else that you brought up a little bit earlier, these questions that people have. Well, agents should have stood up, or more agents should have stood up and sacrificed their careers or suffered whatever consequence. Jocko Willink talks about that in some of his leadership principles. And if people go to my previous column, it's called Narrative Trap, the manufactured outrage over Patel's leadership appointment. That's really my first discussion about Jensen, and I detail Patel's support of Jensen and some of the reasons, why he supported him. But Willett talks about this idea of, what should the appropriate leadership response be in an environment where, you're essentially in a hostile environment. And this comparison, it's a good comparison, but it's a bit of an extreme comparison. He brought up Schindler, and I'm sure people have seen the movie Schindler's List, are familiar with his story and how he saved just, countless Jews from the extermination camps. And he gave this example and said, well, what if Schindler had overtly pushed back on the Nazis? What would have happened? Well, he'd have been eliminated. And the people that he did have the opportunity to save would not be saved. If you apply that, model to the law enforcement sphere, any type of leadership sphere, frankly, you kind of are presented with a choice. You can affect change where you are. You can continue to exert your leadership influence where you are, or you can sacrifice that, stand against the machine, so to speak, be removed, be replaced by someone perhaps that doesn't have the same conservative principles or doesn't have the same ethical outlook that you do. So the bottom line is it's a very personal question, and all this armchair quarterbacking that goes on, out in the X sphere, the social media sphere, is being done by people who really didn't, don't have anything on the line, don't have any skin in the game, and really aren't qualified to speak on the matter. So I thought that was a very interesting take by Jocko Willink, someone who is an expert in leadership matters. And I think that's something that people should consider, before they go, pulling the trigger and spouting off on X about, a topic of which they have no personal or experiential knowledge. But I think to get back to your current point, I think what President Trump is doing in DC is excellent. I think it's outstanding. DC is something special, though. It's an enclave essentially, and Washington and our founders never envisioned Washington, D.C. becoming a residential area. That's why the city was laid out the way it was. So it was always envisioned to be a federal government enclave. So Trump, exercising his authority to, take over Metropolitan PD the way he has, I think is entirely appropriate. And they're already running bulldozers. I think you mentioned that they're running bulldozers and cleaning up some of these areas where indigents have been taking up residence. So I think this is a good thing. Now, whether this turns into a model that can be applied in other cities, that remains to be seen. That's a much bigger question. But I was glad to see a Subway guy get hooked up, and very pleased with DOJ's response to that.
Yeah, the two things I want to go back to the Dan Bongino thing. I do think he owes you an apology. I do support what he's doing, but because you're a friend, I took it personally the way he acted, especially after I looked into the matter of why he was why he had a problem with you, and he was getting poor advice from a very inexperienced individual, and we'll leave it at that. As far as the DC thing, it's interesting the armchair you made when people talk about, well, it's just a sandwich that he threw at him. Well, you don't know what that is. It's similar to the Amadou Diallo incident that happened up in New York a long time ago, where he was up on a darkened doorway and was reaching in his pocket after he was told, don't reach, don't move, stay where you are. As long as you obey the orders that are being given to you, even if they're wrong, obey them, and you've got a chance at a better outcome. He didn't listen. He reached into his pocket in the dark. You don't know what it is. And he was shot multiple times. I think he was shot 45 times, which is not unusual with five individuals firing at him because they think he's reaching for a weapon. Action is always faster than reaction. And you can't take that chance. I think Shipwreck had some things out that were out today, Bill Shipley online, where he was talking about the legal definition of assault and how this met that criteria. That individual's going to he's not going to get that expunged. That's going to be on his record. He's going to have an assault on a federal officer felony conviction. Now, whether or not he does a bunch of time for it, or they do some type of public service, I don't know if there's any minimum time that he has to serve, but he's going to pay a penalty for it. I do think it's a good idea. DC is a different area, like you said. Trump's not going to be able to go into Chicago and take over the Chicago Police Department and run things there. But there are other ways that he can put pressure on Chicago with the funding and things like that. But until it gets bad enough for the citizens to stand up and do something about it, it's highly unlikely any of those cities are going to change. And that's the sad thing about it, And I'll give Dan Bongino credit when he was doing his podcast stuff. He just said, how bad's it got to get before you decide that we're not doing this anymore? I don't know when that is. I think New York's with that communist that's getting ready to be the next mayor. I think they're going to have some very painful days ahead of them. And unfortunately, it's going to spill over and affect a lot of what we do here in other locations, since that's kind of the center of of capital in the world. So the other things that we've talked about is how we're trying to defend the FBI and the efforts of Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and the good men and women of the FBI, the ones that are actually out there doing the job that nobody knows about. And it's not because it's super secret. They're not secret agents or anything like that. it's just not in the nature to talk about the work that you do. There's things that I did in my career, I'm sure that you did in your career. I don't even talk to my wife about it. You know, I've had some incidents where I'll tell you this. There was it was years ago, and I had it was a counterterrorism or a counterterrorism case, and my wife, we were looking for a car for our middle son. And she said, "Hey, I found this car, this Honda that we're going to go look at." And we get in the car, and uh, I'm she's telling me where to drive to. You know, she gave me the address. We're pulling it up, and I was like, "Something seems familiar." And we pulled into the driveway, and I'm like, "Holy crap! This is the subject of one of my cases." Now, it hadn't been anything overt, but I knew what we were looking into, and my wife was frustrated with me for days after that because we looked at this car, we test drove it, and then we left. She goes, "Well, I think it was a good car." And I said, "Yeah, I'm not buying that." "Why are you not buying it?" I don't know. Something just, it didn't drive right. I kept giving her all these excuses, not necessarily lying to her. I tried to make it as truthful as possible about dealing with just the vehicle. But I knew the real reason, and I was never going to discuss it with her, that it had to be the subject of one of my cases. Now, no one's going to be able to figure out what that was based on just what I said. My wife won't be able to figure out what it was because that was years and years ago. But there's a lot of things that FBI agents do that people will never hear about and never learn about.
Mhm.
We've talked about our good friend Kim George and some of the work that she did that she hasn't even talked to us about. It's frustrating when I hear people out there trying to either grift off of it, trying to gin up angst and anger to serve whatever emotional needs that they have. And I think that's where these individuals that are tearing down the FBI constantly and seeking and just relishing in the fact that these individuals were let go from the FBI. I don't know. How do you address it when you have I'm sure that you've had this, and I still have people coming up to me saying that it's fewer now, but they say that the FBI is irredeemable, that, we're just going to have to tear it down and start over. How do you answer that assertion from others? What is your response?
Well, first of all, it's a moot point. You know, Trump has never been a tear down the FBI guy. He's always been about reform, about making the FBI great again. So all the voices, especially early on during the campaign, that were talking about defunding, dismantling, abolishing, it's really just a bunch of adolescent clickbait hounding sort of language. But I've never heard one of those individuals propose an alternative that is actually workable. Vivek Ramaswamy, I think, was a big proponent of dismantling the FBI and transferring the Bureau's national security and law enforcement portfolio to the U.S. Marshal Service. And U.S. Marshals are great people. They do great work, but that was an absolutely absurd thing to say. I haven't heard anything better. And there just simply is no other institution that has the capability, the institutional knowledge that's necessary to appropriately prosecute those national security interests. The wide-ranging criminal portfolio that the FBI is responsible for. There simply is no other organization that is fit to do it. The FBI, quite frankly, is simply too important to quote unquote dismantle. What was the other part of your question, Chris?
So, what do how do you counter what they're saying rather than just saying that? Do you uh, try to use their own reasoning against them? Where what I'll tell you what I do. So when I'm told, okay, we need to dismantle the FBI, I go, okay, well, exactly what does that look like? Tell me how that happens.
Mhm.
We're talking what 13 to 15,000 agents, probably two or three times that number of support employees. The mission that they have. I mean, they as an FBI agent, you enforce all of the U.S. code, even the stuff that's, Title 21, that's just specifically that DEA focuses on. FBI has Title 21 authority. We have the same authority that immigration does. So we're able to do those things that the other agencies are doing, and no other agency has that ability. We can do everything that ATF can do. So what are your thoughts? How do you respond to that? How do you get them to come to your conclusion?
Well, I don't know what other avenue that you can take in terms of rationale other than to point out the fact that there is simply no other alternative. I mean, one thing I have discussed before with some other people that think they have an alternative is, well, what do you think your new agency, how do you think that your new proposed agency is not going to become weaponized by the next, Democrat administration? Why do you think a new agency is going to do any better a job? I mean, we have the Department of Homeland Security. That's a creation really of George Bush after 9/11, and DHS has its own issues, plenty of its own issues. In fact, the leak that initially came out about some of the ICE operations, that came from within DHS's own ranks, ICE's own ranks. So they've got their own issues too. There's no magic institution that's going to be perfect or impervious to corruption. That is the job of the American people to make sure that they vote for the right people, the right sort of law and order people. In my opinion, although the Republican Party is far from perfect, you've got to make sure that you're getting Republican candidates, constitutional candidates in office, people like Donald Trump, who will provide the necessary oversight and appoint people that are interested in transparency and accountability, like Kash Patel, like Dan Bongino, like Chris Hegseth at DOD, and all his other appointments, very important appointments. So this idea that you can just burn down the FBI and come up with something different is an absurdity. And if people can't see that, then I really question their ability to think rationally and to be able to manipulate ideas as an adult. It seems to be a very simple question to me with a fairly simple answer.
Yeah, I usually just bring the questions back when they say the entire FBI is corrupt. Okay, well, how do you know that? Well, look at the weaponization that happened. Okay, tell me how a street agent was weaponizing the FBI. Well, they were the tool that was being used to weaponize it, and they should have been able to recognize what was happening, and then they should have spoken up or they should have walked out. You don't know. There's so many moving pieces to the FBI that when you're down in the field and you're working your cases and moving forward, you don't know what the big decisions that are being made up at FBI headquarters. It's similar to being in the military when you're told to go out on a certain mission and charge a hill. You don't you don't see what the entire full battle plan is for the theater of how important what you're doing is to help something else out going in another area. Now, that can also be on the negative side too, where you don't know that these decisions that are being made by individuals like Ray, Comey, Strzok, Page, Kleinsmith, I can go on, all the way back to Mueller, that they're doing something that is nefarious. You don't sense that down in the field. You just get a very small portion of it. And when you get an arrest warrant from a court that says this individual trespassed, go arrest them. About the only thing that you could really push back on at that time, you can't just say, I'm not going to do it. You're probably going to lose your job, but you don't do it. You don't just say, well, that I'm just afraid of losing my job. You have to be able to, like you said with Wolnick, you have to be able to affect the change that you can. And that's where you have to rely on some senior agents, people that have that credibility, that can go to the front office and say, there's a better way of doing this. And the reason I say this is not, again, just to answer their questions. if there's one thing that I think is missing from FBI headquarters, from Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, and if it is happening, I don't know who this person is. My recommendation, what has always been, and I think you share this, and I know I've heard it from other members of our group. It's fine that Dan Bongino is the deputy director of the FBI, but there should be someone about that level that has the respect of the field, that is well known, well respected in the community, by the media, that can go in and when they speak, people trust what they have to say. Dan's coming in and having to earn that trust. You need somebody in there that can pull the director aside and say, this is wrong. You shouldn't do this. And here's why. I don't think that it's possible for somebody like Dan Bongino to be able to recognize what's wrong in the FBI and the appropriate way to address it, to fix it. I don't sense that's there. I mean, I don't know. Have you heard of anybody that's at that associate deputy director level that has the director's ear? I don't even know who the associate deputy director is right now. And when we were in the FBI, I pretty much knew who the top chain of command was. But it feels kind of odd that I don't know who might be in the room speaking with them. Uh, what are your thoughts on that? I just, again, if I think Dan Bongino's doing the best that he can with what he has, but I do think that a Jim Galliano, a Chris Schwecker, people like that that have that reputation out there would have been a better choice for deputy director. Somebody that could come in that knows how to navigate the system and would know what questions to ask and who to ask them of. It's similar to, I think you and I had this conversation when I talk about people that are field agents, field supervisors. You had a unique experience because technically Washington Field Office, as everybody says, is the resident agency of FBI headquarters. You're just literally down the street from it. But field desk supervisors that have not done time at FBI headquarters, I think it's much more difficult for them to navigate the system because they don't know how it works, what happens inside that Hoover building. And I think that's missing right now. If there's anything, I don't know how they overcome that. Do you have any idea of how they could have somebody that they could rely on, some that could give them some sage advice that has the credibility and the gravitas to say, this is where it's right, this is where it's wrong, you're going in this right direction? Have you got any thoughts about where do they go from here?
Yeah, well, I don't have any visibility as you don't either as to some of those inner workings near the director. Of course, I think Jim Galliano is would be a tremendous resource and asset to Patel, to Dan Bongino. There are a number of people out there like that. I don't know. I don't know what their span of visibility is. I don't know who they are aware of. I don't really have any insight into that in particular. But one thing that you did say a little bit earlier that is that's a good point, is when people are saying, well, the entire bureau is corrupt, and you made the point about field office agents. They're busy working their cases. They're not involved in policy decisions at DC, but that touches on what Jocko Willink talked about. What do you do where you're at if you're confronted with something that's not quite ethical? Do you burn your ability to affect change where you are? And I think for a lot of people, the answer to that question is no, because I worked January 6 leads just like many, many other agents did. Well, pretty much every agent did at WFO at one point or another. And I can tell you that anything that was remotely associated with First Amendment protected activity, that lead got essentially trash canned. I mean, that's not the technical term for it. But if people like myself and other people on my squad weren't there to properly vet and categorize those leads, you'd have had many other individuals out across the FBI tracking down leads that were First Amendment protected activities. That's just one very small example. So I think it's very important for people to understand that the vast majority of the FBI is populated by constitution loving individuals who are there to do the job of catching the bad guys. That is what 99% of FBI agents sign up to do. And Cash Patel said something very, very interesting on the Joe Rogan podcast. He said that he was surprised because remember, this is the guy who wrote Government Gangsters, right? This is the guy coming into the FBI, anticipating a level of corruption, I think, uh, which would rival, maybe some of the harshest critic. I mean, he was a very harsh critic. Dan Bongino was a very harsh critic of the FBI. But he says on the Joe Rogan podcast that he was shocked at how high performing the vast majority of the FBI is as an enterprise, and that he was shocked at how a few people at the top could have created such an atmosphere of weaponization. And a lot of that has already been dealt with. And this kind of goes back to Jensen and Driscoll as well. People are out there screaming for scalps, and we want people fired, and all the rest of it. The old adage, two rights don't make a wrong, or I'm sorry, two wrongs don't make a right. And that's what's happening in the instance of Jensen and Driscoll. But as to, what, who can Patel rely on? Who can Bongino rely on for advice if they seek it? That's kind of a loaded question. Certainly, like you've mentioned, people like James Galliano, people like Chris Sweckert, there are many others, highly qualified individuals. And saying that, we don't know who is, part of that inner circle. So it's really hard to gauge exactly what level of the quality of input that he's receiving at this point.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see where they go from here. If it is true that Trump made that decision, that somebody got into his ear, and likely nobody got into his ear. They got into somebody's ear that got into somebody's ear that got into his ear. And it's almost like that old what that old game where you whisper in somebody's ear and it goes to the next ear. By the time you get to 20 people down, it's totally different. And Trump's a no nonsense kind of guy. He's like, why are we still dealing with this? I could see him saying, this is what I'm hearing. I haven't heard any answers to the contrary. As a matter of fact, what little information I've seen would kind of support this, but you're seeing it out of context. And then he just said, fire them, get rid of them. And these individuals got walked out. I've been pretty vocal about this. I wouldn't have expected Cash Patel to say, I disagree. I'm sure he spoke up in behalf of them. Heck, he and Dan Bongino picked Stephen Jensen to run the Washington field office, to be the assistant director there.
Yeah.
And I would think that they would stick up for him, and just as I am. And I'm willing to entertain if they want to provide some information of something nefarious that they did that determined that they should have gotten walked out the door. They present it, but they haven't been presented with it. They haven't been told. Every person that I've ever known that has been, in these words, walked out, has been told specifically why they were walked out. Now, some, when they get on the outside, will categorize it or say that it's something different. Oh, well, this is why they walked me out, or that's why I walked out. Well, the question I always have is, what was the official reason that the FBI gave you for walking you out? And was that justified or not? I want to know the reason. I never came across anybody that, because they were whining too much inside the FBI about any given topic, that got them walked out. They might have gotten written up for insubordination. Might have got a letter of counseling, over a long period of time. They may have been put on a personnel improvement plan, a PIP, and constantly counseled. I've seen too many people get too many opportunities. Usually, if you get walked out, it's something significant that you did. And I've never heard anybody get walked out because they complained about stuff. I know too many people that were in the Jackson division that I bumped into in Walmart or at the ball fields when all the COVID stuff was going on, and they were very vocal complaining about it inside the Jackson field office here. They didn't get walked out. Was it wrong? Could they? Would I? I know how I would have handled it there. I wouldn't have taken the shot. You're not gonna put something in me. I've got too many friends from my time in the military that took medication before they went over to Saudi Arabia that suffered some horrific medical conditions later on. I would have just said, I'm not doing this. But I would have done it the right way, which is just refuse, just keep refusing and refusing, make them figure out how they're gonna handle that. If they want to isolate me and put me in an office by myself, that's fine. I enjoy my own company. I'm willing to work like that. There are other ways of handling it. So my question to people out there that might be listening to individuals claiming that the FBI retaliated against them, ask what was the official reason. Now, if you look at the official reason, and if it's bogus, then heck, man, I would support everything that they get. They should get their money back. They should get reinstated. They should get all of that. I haven't been presented with any of that information yet. The opposite side of that's true with Stephen Jensen and Driscoll. From what I saw and what I've heard and hearing it from you, I don't think Jensen's been told why he was terminated. But he's the kind of guy that when they said, you no longer work here, he professionally walked out the door. I will note this, and I still ask this question, and I never saw it in my 20 plus years in the FBI. I knew a number of people, probably less than 10, that ended up getting terminated from the FBI. Some of them got their jobs back, but I never knew any of them that the day they got fired, that was the day that the security officer walked them out. Jensen was advised, I believe, on a Wednesday, and he was in the office on Thursday and penned his farewell message to Washington field office. And then I think he served out on Friday. And that is very telling that there's something else going on here that we don't know about. If he's allowed to stay there for another couple of days, the individuals I know of that were walked out, they got to come back in the FBI to get their personal belongings, but it was under escort. I've not heard that Stephen Jensen was escorted back into the building, that he just finished out on Friday and turned in his SACS badge, went out, said, okay, next step for me is to try to get my job back. And I would bet Stephen is the type of guy that he wouldn't want money. He would just want his reputation and his job back. I could see him going that route. I don't know. I haven't spoken with him. I'm open to speaking with him and, at least let him know, hey, I'm praying for you. I think you're a good guy. I'm still going to stand up for you. It doesn't mean that it doesn't negate anything that I've said about the January 6 people, that I do think that their rights were violated, but Stephen Jensen didn't violate their rights. And a street agent in the FBI didn't violate their rights. Those decisions were made up at the higher levels. And when I hear people looking for those scalps of Jensen, Driscoll, or street agents out there, they want 5,000 street agents that were working J6 stuff. They want them all fired. Okay, we're just going to skip due process? That I have a problem with. Any final thoughts here, John, about some of the things that are going on? I will pass along to Ada tomorrow when I'm on the radio with her. It'll be at 1:00 Eastern on WWDB. If you search for the Conservative Voice, you'll get to hear me on there. We're going to talk about this. She already texted me and said we're talking about Subway sandwich guy. So we'll let her listeners hear that. Any parting thoughts about the things you're seeing going on right now with the FBI, what Trump's doing in DC, anything else out there that's piquing your interest?
Well, as far as the scalp hunting goes, that's not Trump's position either, and that's why this is sort of unusual. This this recent spate of dismissals, because Trump stated that he was not interested in seeking the dismissals of individuals who were acting in good faith, right? That were pursuing leads, whether they were J6 leads or otherwise, but that were doing their jobs in good faith. Now, maybe the information that he received, I think you're probably right about the way he received it, and probably right about how he came to that decision. Of course, we're just speculating, obviously, but it does sort of seem in keeping with Trump's personality, that he would, sort of want to put a lid on this issue, and then therefore just issue these dismissal orders. And it is highly unusual that these dismissals were without cause. Jensen still doesn't know why uh, he was dismissed. I believe Driscoll still doesn't know why. So, and both of these guys, I know what they want is they want for justice to prevail. Um, monetary concerns are not the primary driving force in the litigation, but they simply want, as you put it, their good names to be cleared, and for justice to prevail in this circumstance. So, a lot of stuff going on, a lot of stuff to keep up with. Um, uh, Both Driscoll and Jensen have agreed to speak with me on the record when it's appropriate for them to do so. So, if people are interested, there'll be two upcoming town hall columns. One will essentially be uh, giving Jensen an opportunity to tell his side of the story, and then a second column, which will be giving Brian Driscoll an opportunity to tell his side of the story as well. So hopefully people will be looking for those when they come out.
Well, I look forward to it. I know we will be chatting behind the scenes with you will probably reach out to our group about what some things that just some background things to recommend. I don't know anymore I could tell you about Stephen Jensen other than he is what I described. And Driscoll, the people that I've spoken with that know him speak so highly of him. I've not heard one person say something negative about him. And I got to
Neither
tell
have
you,
I.
the to say that he was fired for pushback for not providing names, that's not going to get you fired. It's not. It might get you demoted. It might get you transferred, but it takes a lot to get somebody actually fired. You have to actually done something that either committed a crime or violated constitutional rights or misused your authority as a law enforcement officer. Violated 18 USC 242 for color of law. Those are the things that will typically do that, other than the thing that we were told when we came in. There's three things that really will get you walked out: funds, guns, and buns. So if you're messing around with a source, if you're spending money, you're stealing money that you shouldn't have, and if you use your weapon to commit a crime, those things will get you walked out. But yeah, it's kind of surprising. I was shocked when I was notified. I had a reporter, one of the reporters that we know from the New York Sun, that had texted me that morning and said, "Is this true? What do you think about Jensen?" I'm like, "Why is he asking me about Jensen?" I actually had to search. I didn't even know anything had happened, uh, and I didn't text him back or call him or anything until I had a chance to look into it. And I think he reached out to you as well,
Mm.
probably Gags. Uh, One of the guys just from the New York Sun, that he's an actual, I like him as a reporter. He seems to be very fair and balanced. Doesn't seem to have any bias going into it, and it's always asking the follow-up questions. Unlike some of the people out there that I just scroll right past on X, it's nauseating to see the way that they will engage in that bias. Uh,
Mhm.
so, well, John, we look forward to the article on townhall.com. And I think we do. I don't know. At some point, we probably got to have another Zoom call with a couple of us and maybe invite at least one person. I'd like to have two people that I would recommend, and we'll talk about those offline, that I think it would benefit to be there, just to hear our concerns about the direction of the FBI. I keep toying around. I'm not a weekly writer like you are, but I do have the outlet where I can write at Havoc Journal or with my friend Darren Gobb at Montana Sentinel. I keep toying around with the idea of it's time for a day two agenda in the FBI. Where does Cash and Dan go from here? I gave the recommendation before Cash's name even came up, when it was clear that I think even before Gray announced he was going to retire, uh, that a day one agenda for the FBI director. A couple of those things have been implemented. I don't think they came from me. I just think it was a natural thing to do. There's still some things I would highly suggest that they do, and we can talk about that at another time. Uh, but anyway, I want to thank you for coming on. I wish I had you on sooner. It's kind of an impromptu thing. I'm going to be out of town this weekend. I will be over in the Holy Lands of Alabama, in Tuscaloosa, attending a soft opening of an event venue that some friends of mine have put together there, and I'll give more information on that. But again, thanks for coming on. Everybody check out John. Go to townhall.com. Just search for his last name, Nance, Nantz, and look at the articles there. Periodically, you come up with some other things. I know you're an avid reader. See the books behind you, and you've got connections with some famous authors. And hopefully one day you're going to be that famous author. But my friend, I appreciate you coming on, and for us just kind of shooting the breeze about what's going on inside the FBI. I'm trying to keep these podcasts kind of casual, of just talking and saying what's on our mind, kind of like some of the conversations we have offline. I think that it's of interest to people that are out there. I don't want to get too regimented into these things with clips and stuff like that, but I do appreciate you coming on. My best to Tammy, your boss. And
Yeah. Well,
as
hey,
always,
I appreciate
right.
you having me. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and especially when we all get together and talk about these issues. And look forward to
You're
doing
muted.
it again if you have me on at some other point.
Yeah, I'd love to, and I know our friend Kim has pushed for something where maybe
Mm.
we have all of us except one person from the group who I guarantee you he won't come on the podcast. And we know who that is. But the others just kind of have a roundtable discussion where we just may have one time, and we'll promote it out first. I know we had talked about maybe having Shell from Rob Manus' show, or Stealth Medical, or the Insurrection Barbie that's on X, maybe host a spaces with us on there, and they can ask the questions. I truly enjoyed it when I was on with Stealth Medical, when Kim and I were on, and this was right as the Jensen stuff broke. When he got the position at Washington Field, and I was just getting attacked horrifically in that room. And Stealth, I don't know what her real name is, but she stuck up for me and giving me an opportunity to at least speak. And actually, a couple of the J6ers have followed me, and I've had some interaction with them. I don't think they think as harshly of me. I think they understand that my focus would be on the individuals that actually cause them harm, which would be the people at
Mhm.
DOJ, senior leadership in the FBI.
Right.
But again, I appreciate you coming on. As I said, my best to Tammy. Tell Katie I said hello. Still looking for that follow. If you can make that happen, that'll work out for me. But again, I appreciate it. Mr. Producer, we're going to cut away from there. I'm going to give my shout outs and then some final thoughts. But thanks, John, for coming on.
Thank you.
All right. All right, let's go to the shout outs here. All right, so if you'll cut over to my screen share, the first shout out I'm giving is to my good friend Chris Salcedo. John Nance and I were actually on Salcedo's show this past Monday, and it was he had texted both of us a couple days before that to come on and chat with him about things going on in the FBI, and really appreciate his stance that he's taken over in Texas. They've got a myriad of problems over there, especially with the Democrats out and with rhinos like John Cornyn. The other is Chad Prather. Chad and I were also on Salcedo's show when we did Salcedo's Court, talking about some of the recent FBI and political issues. And great guy, good Christian man. He usually starts off each day with some type of scripture. I follow him. I suggest that you follow him. Just a really good man. We DM'd each other after we had not met or talked before that. We DM'd each other after we were both on the air. He is a great guy. I look forward to having him on the podcast, and maybe he'll return the favor. The other, Ada Nestor. So I'm going to be on the air with Ada tomorrow. She is returning to WWDB, the Conservative Voice, tomorrow. It's on noon to 2 Eastern time. You can find it if you just search for WWDB, the Conservative Voice, or if you look for the Conservative Voice X account, they will typically live stream from the studio. You'll just see a picture of me. I'm calling in on the telephone, and I'll be on for about a half hour. They've got a great format. Their radio format's similar to what we do here on the podcast, but Ada had her father had recently passed away, so she's been dealing with some family issues, and then her kids are getting back active into sports, so they've got a lot of things going on in their life, and she has not been on the air for a few months. She will be back on tomorrow. She's going to sit in for Gary Heasley, who is the lead host there. But I'm looking forward, and I was just thrilled that she asked for me to come on, and I definitely want to talk to her about the shout out she got from Donald Trump on her Substack article dealing with the Russia collusion stuff. You want to really dig into the weeds. Find Ada Nestor on Substack. There's a reason she's in the top 50 of political Substack writers that are out there. So, Mr. Producer, we can come back to me, and I'll say my last goodbyes. Again, thank everybody for coming in. This was just kind of a chat session, impromptu thing. I was glad that John took the time to come on the air with me, and I hope that people enjoyed it. If you have any questions or something, don't hesitate to DM me. If I'm not connected with you, it may take me a little while to get back to you. I did find that little section there where people had sent me messages that I wasn't connected with, and it kind of segregates those. I'm sure John would be okay with you DMing him or putting some questions out there. If you think it would be a good idea to have a roundtable discussion with some of us retired FBI agents, it'd be no holds barred. You can ask us anything. Now, if you come in and attack us, that's going to be a problem. That's why I think if we have somebody that kind of manages it, like a Shell from Rob Manus's show, she's really good at managing those types of atmospheres. Stealth Medical, I appreciate what she did for Kim and I when we were on her spaces on X. I listen in from time to time when they have things going on. Very smart lady, very smart. She would have made a great FBI analyst. But I want you guys to take the time to listen tomorrow. I will be over in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. A good friend of mine, they're opening up a nightclub there, an entertainment venue called Two Dimes, TWODIMES. And they've got, it's for friends and family only this Saturday. So I'm going to go over and hang out with some friends. And we're going to go listen to Dexter Roberts, who was number 7. I think he was placed 7th on American Idol. He's from my wife's hometown in Fayette, Alabama. So going to get to meet him and just kind of hang out there. My boss, Pam, is not going to be able to come with me. We're also having on Sunday my daughter-in-law's baby shower up here. So that's kind of a chick thing. They're going to do that. I'm going to go over and spend some time with my dad tomorrow, attend the event on Saturday. I'll come back sometime Sunday and then hit the ground running from there. But then again, thanks for listening in. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to throw them my way. Promote the podcast out there. We're starting small. We're growing. Get some recommendations of things you'd like to hear, changes you think we need to make. I've had one of my good friends up in Virginia recommend changing my background here with some of the things behind here. I've had others compliment me on it. So we'll see. We'll work this thing out. But thanks again for tuning on the Blunt Force Conservative Podcast. We will see you next time. Follow me on X.